Hello and welcome to the FilmFile, the film show for film geeks by film geeks. This week brought to you in stunning Technicolor.
And by Yoda almost there.
Colours.
This to you brought I have.
Right. Do you want to hum the theme tune?
Bum, 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 bum,
I don't know why this helps me get into it. And hello and welcome. I'm Lee Ford.
And I'm Andy Meakin.
And this is the FilmFile, your favourite show that you're currently listening to about film. Still with us, still enjoying the FilmFile? Were you aware there are over 80 other previous episodes, as well as bonus episodes? You weren't? Well, all you have to do is head over to your favourite podcast platform and hit that subscribe button. And remember to hit that like button as well as leave a review. And we won't ever bother you again, you bastards. Where was I going to go with that one? Clearly not there.
Stop listening, you bastards.
Yeah. All right, I've got one. And trust me, we won't ever tell the Babadook where you live. Is that all right?
Fair enough.
No, Babadook, stay away. God, I hated that film.
yeah, I think you've said that every episode that we've done for the past three or four episodes.
Every time I think about it, I just hate it.
I've still not watched it, so I'm going to have to dig it out and review it.
We'll do as a deep dive, and I can tell you one reason I hate it, and it's the kid in the Babadook, and you just think, eat the little shit. Get him eaten in the first reel, and just make it into it's one of those horror movies that all the critics loved because, it's saying something. It's about something. It's about women's issues and is she going mad? What's it like to be a single mother? Fuck off. Just give me a good horror movie. It really does. It's like, I hate it because the critics just lauded it as being something special and new. It's a horror movie. It's a thinking woman's horror movie. No, it's not. It's a ghost story that if it had a guy in it, you would have completely passed it by. For instance. My rant of the day. No, it's not really horror. It's a psychological thriller. So when you get directors who've moved up into the horror movie and they into doing a horror movie, probably like Walter Salas that came in and did Dark Water. No, it's not a horror movie. Psychological thriller. No, it's a horror movie. It's about haunted water. Just don't be afraid to say it's a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a snobbery.
Yeah, and the critics love it. Sometimes they get it right. Like Candyman, but it's not really a horror movie. It's a psychological, deep look at problems of single women and madness. Yeah, with a ghost in a top hat. You tell me. Right.
You can get in touch with us.
You can get, yes, I've got all about that. Babadook rant over. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so by reaching out to us
over on Twitter at FilmFile UK, on Instagram, FilmFile UK, or you can email us with thoughts, suggestions, lyrics to music videos, anything. I'm happy to read anything. Podcast at filmfile.uk.
You could even tell us why you like Babadook, for instance.
Or if you live in Salt Lake City, tell us how you found the show.
Excellent. Oh, I'm still Babadooking out. Our deep dive this week is one of those very rare things. A Steven Spielberg film that was not as financially or critically successful as many other of his films, even though it received a belated popularity after an expanded version aired on American television, and its subsequent TV on cable TV and home video rose it to the level of cult status. Which Steven Spielberg film are we talking about? Well, it was written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who brought us Back to the Future. It starred an ensemble cast which featured Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, John Belushi, John Candy, Christopher Lee, Tim Matheson, and Toshiro Mifune, as well as Mickey Rourke and Robert Stack in small parts. And the story involves a panic in Los Angeles after the December Pearl Harbor attack in the year 1941.
Insert trailer.
When we think of Steven Spielberg, we don't think big, all out, crazy comedy. Usually that territory is left to someone like John Landis. But no, he tackled 1941. The chaos of the events following the Pearl Harbor attack, and it's summarized by Dan Aykroyd's character, Sergeant Tree, who states he cannot stand Americans fighting Americans. This film is closer to It's a Mad, 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 Mad World than it is to any other Steven Spielberg film. This is the film that subsequently made. Start again. This is the film that subsequently let Steven Spielberg move on to Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. So it's important, but as we said, it's not particularly well thought of. However, it's a film that Andy and I both like a lot for the fact that it is a crazy comedy that really holds together in the flimsiest of ways. Great cast, great settings, fantastic special effects. Andy, 1941.
Yeah, this is a film that I've held a torch for many years, but I thought that I was alone in it. And it's only when you recommended it as a deep dive, I was like, you like it as well. Excellent.
It's a bit like a dirty secret, isn't it? Oh,
yeah,
you like 1941.
Yeah, saying it normally in polite society, you get shunned from parties. You get stripped of your film licenses. I mean, if you in the old days of renting films from Blockbuster, if you went in and asked if you had 1941, they revoke your membership and kick you out. That's how disregarded this film is. I remember seeing this as a kid, early 80s VHS, and I heard after I watched it that it was widely regarded as a mess, even though I kind of enjoyed it when I was watching it. And despite being told by many that I shouldn't revisit it as I got older because it's terrible, in my early 20s, I did. I took that plunge and I revisited it to see whether it was just 8-year-old me had loved this film because you're an 8-year-old and you're stupid. And in my early 20s, when I watched it, I found a lot of fun still to be had with it. And since then, it's become an occasional revisit. Every 4 or 5 years, I'll stick this on again. Yes, the film is patchy. Yes, it stays on far too long for a comedy farce. I mean, it's almost 2 hours in the standard cut, and the director's cut is 146 minutes.
Wow, I've never seen that. Never seen that version.
But by golly, there's a lot of fun moments within this that just land so well for me. Like you say, it's set in the days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The west coast of the US is paranoid that another attack's going to hit the mainland, and all the forces are deployed, causing mayhem and chaos to the areas they occupy. Out in the ocean, a Japanese sub manned by the most inept crew ever, alongside a Nazi officer played by the ever-excellent Christopher Lee, stalks the waters seeking a target, hoping to locate Hollywood and make an impact before they can return to Japan with honor. And from the start, Spielberg is having fun. He starts the film with a parody of his opening moments of Jaws. The skinny dipping scene is reenacted. Only this time, it's not a shark under the water, it's a submarine. And from that point onwards, I was caught. I was chuckling and I was thrown from one scene to the next. I rewatched this a couple of days ago, and the scattershot effect with which he throws all the mini sketches and like additional storylines together. You have like 3 minutes with these characters, then you bounce over to these ones and bounce over to these ones. So if you don't care too much for one section, that's fine, because John Belushi's Captain Wild Bill Kelso will be up in a few minutes, and boy, he's a genuine highlight. It's one of these, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And for me, more of it sticks than what falls.
I'll give you that, Andy. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let's be honest. It is a bit of a mess of a film. Too many characters who aren't necessarily always funny. Spielberg loves his slapstick gags, and whether that's a slapstick gag that involves people or machinery like tanks and planes. Um, it's a love letter to planes, and we've seen Spielberg tackle this before. It's got a great cast. It's got an old fashioned feel. As I said, it's a mad, 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 mad world. It reminds me of that. It's slightly as though he has this huge pot and he just throws everything into it. And now some of it makes for a great recipe, and some of it he just overcooks. But it's got a great energy to it. And even though it is flawed, it's flawed because it's not that it's a terrible film. It's flawed because it's a director who was at the top of his game, given too much freedom. And we've talked about this with other directors. And he went on a jaunt to make the kind of 1940s to the 1960s screwball, big budget, action starred, sorry, not action starred, star packed vehicle of old. And it feels like a love letter, let alone the effects sequence, which are absolutely stunning. It's just a little bit all over the place. But if you can get over the all over the place ness of it, then there's a fine and beautifully crafted film at the heart of it that is hit and miss. And I agree, there are a lot of misses, but there's some great hits. And if you're in the right mood for it and you go in expecting that, then it works. It's funny because I knew of the film before I saw it, because it didn't do well in the States. It got a quite a limited release in the UK, and in fact appeared in one of those sort of cinemas where you used to get films that were coming round again after a second release or hadn't quite done well. And so I never saw it in its full glory, but I absolutely loved it. And I loved everything connected to it. I loved the look of the film, and I had the poster on my wall. And I love Stephen Bissett and Rick Veitch's um, wild take on the comic book adaptation of it, which was absolutely crazy. In fact, Steven Spielberg distanced himself from it. But as Bob Gale said, it's down in history books as a big flop, but it wasn't. The movie didn't make the kind of money that Spielberg's films usually did. Um, but the film was by no means a flop, and both Universal and Columbia have come out of it just fine. And I think that's it. I think you because you think of it as a flop, you go in expecting it to be terrible. It's not terrible. It's great. It's not always particularly funny, but it's a visual riot, and you just stick with it. And there's a reason he never went back to that kind of filmmaking, because it doesn't always work. But just seeing it is an absolute visual treat. And because of that, because he reined himself in, and because he knew he'd gone over budget, and he delivered his first flop to a studio, when it came to Raiders of the Lost Ark, he would take much more control over the budget, and much more control about delivering on time. And therefore, without this film, we wouldn't have got Raiders, we wouldn't have got E.T., and I don't think we would have got the Spielberg we know today.
The casting in 1941, you rattled off some names earlier on, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of all the people who pop up within here that you'll recognise. But the highlights, I mean, I've already mentioned John Belushi's Captain Wild, Bill Kelso, who's a crazed fighter pilot on perfect manic form. And one thing that I love on his character is the eccentricities of, he never seems to drink. He always gets off, he takes a swig and then spits it straight out. And there's a great sequence where he lands outside an army base and goes in to get an updated report on what's happening. And he walks along and everyone's giving him a drink, and it's spit, and then walks back out doing exactly the same. And it's just so perfectly ridiculous that it has me chuckling every time that I watch it. Slim Pickens has a moment in the film that's completely inconsequential to the rest of the story, but it was just an excuse to get Slim Pickens abducted by Japanese submarine naval officers and tortured with prune juice. And it's hilarious. It's a cracking 10 minutes approximately he's in the film for, and that's all that he does. He gets abducted, doesn't disclose any information, and escapes. But the whole sequence is brilliant. It's absolutely marvellous. And you even get the great Robert Stack, who you briefly mentioned. He gets a chance to shine as Major Sitwell, who makes me chuckle at how emotional he gets at Disney's Dumbo as he sat watching it while all the mayhem's going on outside the movie theatre. Like
Look,
I said,
okay.
there's a lot to love in this film, but, and here's the slight issue, sometimes the humour leaves you wincing because it's not aged very well. There's racial caricatures, there's an attempted assault that is played for laughs, there's blatant misogyny, which may be reflective not of the time that the film was made, late 70s, early 80s, but the time it was set in. But Spielberg isn't as skillful in approach as someone like Mel Brooks when it comes to handling such sensitive issues. And his use of this type of comedy feels awkward and it feels misplaced. There's an attempt to do reverse blackface with whiteface at the same time, which happens towards the end of the film with the tank crew, which kind of doesn't work because it then resorts to the now blacked up John Candy being told by the now whited Frank McRae to get to the back of the tank and feeling really upset that he's been put into the lower position. And yes, it's satirizing the values of the 40s, but it just feels unnecessary and it feels somewhat nasty.
Yeah, I think there is a mean spirit to it. There's nobody that's ever really particularly likable in this film, and I think that's again one of the reasons why it didn't engage. We know that it made money, but it just didn't engage. Look, this is not that it's not Spielberg firing on all cylinders. Whatever you think of the film, it's a glorious looking movie with some fantastic spectacle, some special, some spectacular special effects, and
Yes.
some great set pieces. It's just one of those screwball comedies that it's not Steven Spielberg's genre to do screwball. Somebody like John Landis, I think, would have done a better job on this, and it just collapses under a glut of ideas, and at times it's confusing and it's awkward in its laughs. But as a piece of filmmaking, and that alone gives it the perfect reason to sit and watch it. Whether you think it's funny or not, by the end of it, you're still in for a visual treat and you'll have never seen anything like it. And you know what? You'll never see this kind of comedy, this big scale, huge screwball comedy again. It really is a part of an era. And maybe, again, that's where they went wrong. Maybe in the 60s, this kind of film would have worked.
When it lands really well. The humour, when it lands, the slapstick elements really play well. It's a joyously satirical approach to wartime hysteria. And it, like you say, it looks spectacular. It well and truly deserved the Oscar nomination that it received for the special effects. And, of course, the music from John Williams. The rousing march main theme is possibly one of his best pieces of his career, in my opinion. It's an awkward film. It's a messy film. But it's an unashamedly fun film at the same time. And it's definitely worth a watch. If you've always been put off with this because you've heard that it was a bomb, you've heard that it was a disaster, don't let anyone else sway your opinion. Give it a watch yourself. You might find something to love in it, the same way that even though I recognise the faults in it, I still embrace the film overall.
Andy, where can we find 1941?
It regularly pops up, usually around Christmas time, on one of the terrestrial TV channels. At the moment, it's not available for free on any streaming service, but you can rent it from all streaming services such as Sky, Box Office, Amazon, etc., etc. Rental is the way to do it at the moment. Give it a few weeks and maybe it'll pop up somewhere.
Okay, and that's 1941, and that's the deep dive for this week.